July 9, 2006. Berlin, Germany. Italy stood on top of the world. 4 World Cup titles. The most defensively disciplined team in history. A golden generation of players. Buffon, Cannavaro, Pirlo, Totti, Del Piero, at the peak of their powers. They had just beaten France on penalties in the final. Fabio Cannavaro lifted the trophy, and in that moment, nobody could have imagined what was coming. 12 years later, Italy would fail to qualify for the World Cup. For the first time in 60 years. Then they'd miss it again, and again. 3 consecutive World Cups, missed by a 4-time world champion. This is the story. To understand the collapse, you first have to understand the empire. Italian football didn't just produce winners. It produced a system, a philosophy built on defensive mastery, the famous catenaccio, a lock so tight opponents couldn't breathe. And Serie A, Italy's top division, was the greatest league in the world through the 1980s and 1990s. Maradona played there, Van Basten, Gullit, Ronaldo, Zidane. The world's best came to Italy because Italy was where football lived, and the national team reflected that dominance. 4 World Cup titles, 1934, 1938, 1982, 2006. Only Brazil had won more. In 2006, Italy's squad read like a Hall of Fame. Gianluigi Buffon, possibly the greatest goalkeeper to ever play the game. Fabio Cannavaro, the tournament's best defender who would win the Ballon d'Or that year. Andrea Pirlo, a midfielder so elegant he seemed to play at a different speed to everyone else. Francesco Totti, Alessandro Del Piero, a team of legends. And in Berlin, they delivered, beating France in the final, lifting the World Cup, Italy, champions of the world, for what nobody knew then would be the last time. The warning signs came quickly. At the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, Italy arrived as defending champions. They were eliminated in the group stage, beaten by Slovakia, drawing with New Zealand. New Zealand, a nation of 5 million people whose players mostly played in domestic obscurity. Italy drew with them. The world noticed. 4 years later in Brazil, the story was the same. Group stage, out, back-to-back group stage exits for the reigning world champions. But the federation, the FYGC, refused to acknowledge the deeper problem. They changed managers. They tinkered with formations. What they didn't do was look at what was rotting underneath, the talent pipeline. For decades, Italian football had produced world-class players with conveyor belt consistency. But Serie A had changed. The league that once attracted the world's best was now losing them to England and Spain. Premier League money was pulling players away. La Liga's glamour was pulling coaches away. And Italian clubs, drowning in debt, were cutting youth academies. The next generation of Italian players simply wasn't being developed. November 13th, 2017, San Siro, Milan, Italy versus Sweden, a 2-legged playoff for the 2018 World Cup. Italy had lost the first leg 1-0 in Stockholm. Now at home, in front of their own fans, they needed to win. They had 90 minutes. They had home advantage. They had a stadium roaring behind them. They created nothing. Sweden goalkeeper Robin Olsen was barely tested all night. Italy managed 0 shots on target in the entire match, 0. The final score, 0-0. Italy were out of the 2018 World Cup. For the first time since 1958, the Azzurri would not be in Russia. Manager Gianpiero Ventura sat in the dugout staring at the pitch. In the stands, Italian fans wept. Some sat motionless, unable to process what had just happened. Gianluigi Buffon, playing his final match for the national team at 39 years old, broke down in tears in the tunnel. The greatest goalkeeper of his generation, 16 years of service to the Azzurri, and he never got to play in a World Cup final. His last act in an Italian shirt was watching his country miss the tournament entirely. What happened next gave Italy hope. In the summer of 2021, a new Italy emerged. Under manager Roberto Mancini, a young, energetic squad won Euro 2020, beating England in the final at Wembley on penalties. Italy were European champions. The press called it a renaissance, a new golden generation. The rebuild was complete. 8 months later, North Macedonia scored in the 92nd minute to knock Italy out of the 2022 World Cup qualifiers. 1-0, European champions knocked out by North Macedonia in injury time. The Renaissance lasted 8 months. The Gazzetta dello Sport, Italy's most famous sports newspaper, called it the Second Apocalypse. The rebuild wasn't complete. It had barely begun. If 2018 was a shock and 2022 was a crisis, 2026 became something worse. Expected. Italy failed to win their qualifying group, finishing behind Norway. They made the playoffs and lost to Bosnia and Herzegovina, a nation ranked 66th in the world. The Gazzetta dello Sport ran a front-page editorial. They called it the Third Apocalypse. But the most devastating line wasn't the headline. It was a quote from an Italian fan outside a pub in Rome. This time it was different. "We have gotten used to not making it." A 4-time world champion. And their own fans had gotten used to failure. Sports Minister Andrea Abodi called for the federation president to resign. Former Italian Premier Matteo Renzi said, "Italian soccer has failed. Football isn't just entertainment in our country. It's part of our culture and national identity." Italy have not played a World Cup match since 2014. They have not won a knockout game since 2006. 3 straight World Cups. Missed. The only world champion in history to achieve that dishonor. The reasons run deeper than bad luck. Serie A, once the greatest league in the world, now struggles to attract top talent. The last Italian club to win the Champions League was Inter Milan in 2010. Italian youth development, once the envy of Europe, has produced almost no world-class players in 20 years. The system that built Buffon, Pirlo, and Cannavaro no longer exists, and the players who replaced them simply weren't ready for the biggest stage. In the streets of Rome and Milan, children still play football, still dream of the Azzurri, still believe that somewhere a new Pirlo is being born, a new Buffon, a new Cannavaro, because Italy's story cannot end like this. 4 World Cups, a century of footballing identity, cannot be reduced to 3 consecutive failures and a front page calling it the new normal. The fall of Italian football is real. The decline is documented. The damage is deep. But the history is deeper, and in football, history has a habit of demanding its dues. This was the story football never fully told you. Subscribe. There are more stories where this came from.